Glad you're here this morning. Lesson 6 on the series, The Devil, Sin, and Hell. I don't know why it's stuck in the middle. Should have flashed that up. Go through and repeat some of these cards. The series, Engraving Heavenly Truths, uses cards, the old flash cards, like maybe you had in school or maybe you had at home. Most of the time I would think about them, they would be math. You know, on the front of the card it'd say 2 plus 2, on the back would say 4. You would answer, turn it over. If you got it right, you know you were happy, stuck it in one pile. If you missed it, you put it in the other pile, and hopefully you got finished. You know I got them right, stack was higher. So that's what Engraving Heavenly Truths. Hold up those cards here. You couldn't see. So we use them on a overhead, and my throat will probably go out. So I'm going to need your help today. But part of the process is the cards, the flashcards help you remember, let's call them facts, elements of the Bible that hopefully when you know them, like this card, some names of the devil, and then you look at those names, each one of them should mean something to us. I want to focus in on the first one, Satan. That's probably the name, if we don't say the devil, we say Satan, that's the most. But that name means, and it happens to be the last word down there, adversary. That's what Satan means. So the devil is Satan, he's our adversary. That's our enemy. Our immortal and mortal enemy. He's out to kill us spiritually. He brought death into the world. We'll see that with another card. And it sticks right in the middle. Because from the beginning, Satan was, the card said, a murderer. He caused the death of Adam and Eve. And all of us, the physical death, but the spiritual death of Adam and Eve. Because he was the father of what? He was the first to do it. He was the first to lie. 1 John 3:8. He that committeth sin is of the devil. If you're of the devil, you can't be of God. So if we commit sin, there's a gap, there's a space between us and God. Satan deceives who? He deceives the whole world. There's not any of us that are exempt from his deception or temptation. What is sin? Define it. Disobeying God's laws. We also brought in the term missing the mark. Missing the mark. God's will is that bullseye. We try to hit it. We can be left, we can be right, we can be long, we can be short, we can be too liberal, we can be too conservative. All those things. We've got to hit that bullseye. If we don't, then we have disobeyed His law and we've sinned. James 4:7, we know the last part of that usually. Resist the devil and what will happen? He'll flee from us, but the first part of that is just as important. Submit yourself, therefore, to God. If you do that, then resisting the devil, I'll say easier. It's not easy, but it's easier if you're submitting to God. All unrighteousness, we've kind of alluded to this, is what? Simple. All unrighteousness is sin. Sin is unrighteousness. Not right with who? With God. Satan tempts everybody, every man. But who tempts no man? God. Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. When we commit sin, what do we become? slaves or servants of sin. We understand that. You do it once, gets a little easier. This card explains that or helps us with that. The more we sin, what happens to our hearts? Gets hardened, calloused, it sears over, has no feeling for what sin is. That feeling, just like the people on the day of Pentecost, when they were pricked in their hearts, when they had that feeling, and we understand that that's not the physical blood-pumping heart. It's more like the mind, the consciousness. When they were pricked in their consciousness and realized that they were doing wrong, what did they say? What can we do to make it right? Sin separates man from who? From God. We need to know that. Those who practice sin cannot inherit the kingdom. That's a big deal, isn't it? Why are we here? That's it. That's the goal, to inherit the kingdom. If we sin, we can't do it, so what should we avoid? Avoid sin. The wages of sin is what? Wages, that's something we earn, something we deserve. The second part of that verse, thank goodness, says, but the gift of God is eternal life. A gift, something we don't earn, something that's given to us. But we earn death. Disobedience brings a just recompense of reward. For what? Every sin. God's going to judge fairly, righteously, correctly. Disobedience, sin. What does it deserve? The wages of sin's what? Death. So disobedience is going to bring a just reward for every sin. These are the cards from last week. What was the reason for the flood? Every intent of man's heart was on what? Evil continually. The sin of Jacob. Who did he lie to? Deceived his father, said he was his brother, remember? Stole the birthright after he had purchased the birthright. What was the sin of Nadab and Abihu? Offered strange fire. Unauthorized by God fire. A number that perished in the wilderness because of unbelief. Remember, the spies went in, 10 came out and said, there's giants there, we're scared, we're not going in. 2 said, we can do it. The people sided with the 10, and because of that, this number of men of war that were numbered when they come out of Egypt were sentenced to wander in the wilderness for 40 days. Why was it 40 days or 40 years? Why was it 40 years? One for every day that the spies were in the land. Okay? Perished in the wilderness 603,000 and a few more. Today's card. Oh yeah, we can get through them. I'm positive. Saul's sin. Saul may have had a lot of sins, but the one we want to focus in on today, does anybody have an idea? He was told to destroy what nation? The Amalekites. The Amalekites who were descendants of Esau. Who's Esau? Jacob's twin brother that he deceived to get his birthright. These Amalekites are descendants of him, so they're also descendants of Abraham. Abraham, Isaac, Esau, and Jacob. But these Amalekites had done something as the children of Israel were coming out of Mount Sinai on their wanderings. These Amalekites have ambushed the Israelites. Exodus 17, you can read about it, verses 6 through 8. Okay? At this point, Israel wasn't a great fighting nation. They weren't very well organized. And so the Amalekites, I want to say, took advantage of that. And they attacked them. I think if you read there, it kind of suggests, if it doesn't say it outright, that they attacked them from the rear. Tried to pick off who would be normally at the rear of your wandering or process across the wilderness. The sick, the weak, the ones that can't keep up. And so that's kind of where they were attacked. God protected them. This is the account where, you remember, if Moses had his hands up, who was winning? The Israelites. Moses got tired, dropped his hands, the Amalekites would win. So they propped his arms up on, I guess, rocks, boulders, whatever, so his arms would be up. And the Israelites prevailed through God's help. So we want to keep that in mind. Deuteronomy 25, 17 and through 19 says that God remembered the Amalekites and what they had done to the Israelites, and he said they're going to be blotted, wiped out off of the face of the earth. Boy, that seems a little drastic, doesn't it? Not for God. They were hindering God's process, hindering His children. And we can read, I found somewhere, and I couldn't find all the references to this, but it says at least 3 other times the Amalekites had attacked or hindered Israel. So if you look through that, see if you can find those at least 3 other times. 1 Samuel 15, 1 through 9. Verse 2 in particular, thus saith the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed him on the way when he come up from Egypt. And so this is Samuel, through God, identifying Amalek as an enemy. And so when we say this, God tells Saul, through Samuel, I want them wiped off the face of the earth. What does he say? Nobody left alive, all the possessions killed that could be killed, animals and things like that. Don't loot their possessions. He just wanted them wiped off, didn't he? Because of what they did, how they had hindered or how they had treated Israel. This is interesting. So they go into battle. The battle's over. Did Saul do what he was commanded to do? No, he left one person alive. He left the king alive. Does anybody remember that name? Agag. Agag left the king alive. And what else? The best of the sheep, the best of the oxen, the best of the animals. Okay? Best of the herds and flocks, and King Agag were spared. Samuel comes to Saul and says, why have you done this? I hear the bleating of the sheep, the lowing of the oxen. What's Saul's response? I kept the animals alive because later on, what was he planning on doing? At least that's what he said. He's going to sacrifice them. Okay? What's Samuel telling? Verse 21, I think. Look there. Somebody read that. 1 Samuel 15, 21. Is that the one that says it? Jerry?
Took of the plunder, sheep and oxen, and the best of the things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice to the Lord your God.
Okay. Yeah, so first of all, when confronted with it, he blamed the people, didn't he? Well, the people did it. You know, I was going to do what you said, but the people wanted to save all this stuff so they could have sacrifice. Verse 22. What's the response? You got that, Jerry? Let you.
As the Lord has great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in
Okay? Sacrifices, the Lord likes that. But what does He like even better? Okay? Obedience is better than sacrifice. That's a key verse. If you read on further, trying to think of what does Samuel do to Agag? We could get graphic, but we'll just say he killed him. Hewn him. Does it say hewn? Is that the word? Seemed like I remember that. Cut him up. What happened to all the animals? They were destroyed as well. Because of his sin, what happened to Saul? Okay, he's rejected of God. The kingdom's going to be taken away from you. And God's Spirit departs from him. And we see later on that this causes him to be suspicious, jealous of David, act irrationally at times, all because he did not obey God and destroy the Amalekites. Yeah. 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 It's almost the same thing as when Israel was out wandering and were rebelling, and he tells Moses, I'm just going to wipe them out and start over with you. And Moses is able to talk him out of that. So God, in that case, had regret. Do you think he had, doesn't it mention something like that with the flood? God... So God has regrets. I've repented. I think sometimes it says God repented or changed his mind. Okay, good point. Anything else about Saul's sin? All right, question 52. Get a drink of my milky water. It's settled down now. First of all, what was Jezebel's sin? Once again, it'd be hard to pick one out, wouldn't it? Jezebel was the wife of King, what was his name? Ahab. Ahab, who is noted as being worse than any king ever, before or those that came after him. The worst ever. That's pretty bad when you go back and read the accounts of the things that some did and some didn't do. One thing that Ahab did is he married Jezebel, who was not Israelite, and she brought in Baal worship. Okay? Really embraced that. So you got Ahab, who was very, very bad, and you got this pagan God worshiper who's mentioned as being bad, and you put them together, and I don't think you get 1 + 1 is 2. I think you had 1 + 1 is about 15. Whatever it was, they seemed to, what we'd say, feed off of each other. Okay, here's some of the things that Jezebel did, then we'll talk about what's on the card. Or we'll talk about why this is on the card. All right, she was the wife of King Ahab, who provoked the Lord to anger more than all the kings before him. 1 Kings 16, 29 to 33, that's where it says that. Provoked Lord to anger more than all the other kings. 1 Kings 18, verses 4, and then again in verse 13, she killed God's prophets. You remember the famine during this period of time, and Elijah and some of the things that went on. There was a famine for a long period of time. During that time, when other people were struggling, she was feeding the prophets of Baal. So she was feeding the false prophets while everybody else was struggling, particularly God's prophets. On at least one, and so actually several occasions, she tried to personally kill Elijah. Okay? 1 Kings 19, 1 and 2. Tried to kill Elijah. She feeds Baal's prophets during the famine. She killed other prophets. She was married to Ahab, brought in Baal worship. But what I want to focus in on is the death of Naboth. Naboth had a vineyard. Ahab saw it, and he wanted it. He tried to buy it, maybe tried to do it the right way. 1 Kings 22 or 21, 1 Kings 21, starting there in verse 1, going down to verse 13. He wanted Naboth's vineyard, Ahab did. Naboth said, I can't sell it to you. It's been in my generation for years. It's our inheritance, going back all the way to when the land was divided up. I can't sell it to you. Even though you're the king, I can't sell it. Ahab said, that's all right. Never mind, I'll go find another vineyard. Did that what he did? No. He went home, threw himself on his bed, and pouted and didn't eat. Was he 5? Or was he the king of Israel? Sounds like he was 5. But he shouldn't have been that way. Threw himself on his bed and pouted and wouldn't eat. Jezebel comes in. What's wrong, honey? Probably didn't call him honey. Maybe. Well, I wanted this vineyard and this guy wouldn't sell it to me, and now I'm just so upset I can't even eat. That's not in there, but that's basically what's going on, you understand. Jezebel said, I'm going to get that for you. So she sends letters to the city officials, hires false witnesses against Naboth that he blasphemed. If there's blasphemy against God, what was the punishment according to the old law? I wrote that down somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. Leviticus 24, 13 through 16 mentions it. If someone blasphemes against God, they were stoned to death. So a false witness comes, says Naboth blasphemed. He's taken out and he's stoned. He's killed. So who gets his land now? Ahab. Right? So Jezebel's sin is she provoked or caused Naboth's death just to satisfy her pouting husband who wanted his vineyard. Okay? Among those other things that we talked about. That's an evil woman, isn't it? We've mentioned this before. You see a lot of kids named Paul or John. Ladies named Mary or Martha or Sarah. Because those are good people in the Bible, aren't they? That's who we want to be named after. I didn't say Levi. But we understand that, right? Have you ever met a Jezebel? No, I don't mean that somebody said she acted like or behaved like Jezebel, and that would probably be hyperbole. We don't name kids Jezebel, do we? Bad reputation. Right, by reputation. So Elijah prophesies her death. 1 Kings 21, verse 23. First Kings 21, 23. And concerning Jezebel, the Lord also spoke, saying, the dogs shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. The dogs are going to eat her. That'd be a horrible way to go, right? Except that wasn't actually probably the way that she died. That was just the after result of that. We go on down the road. Ahab's dead. Jezebel has inserted her sons as power. God's had enough. They die in battle. Another king is taking over, and he's going to wipe out anybody that has any allegiance to Ahab and Jezebel. Okay? You can read about that as you go through looking at the book of Kings. So Jezebel's going to try to persuade him as only she can, and it says that she fixed herself up, makeup, hair, adorned certain things so that she would look good. And as Jehud comes in, she asks, is it going to be peace? And some of the servants there throw Jezebel out the window. She splatters, her blood splatters on the wall. So I'd say she's probably dead then, before the dogs get her. But they don't go and take care of Jezebel right away. They kind of go in and have a meal. Maybe it was a celebratory meal. I don't know. But after a time, Jehud says, go out and check on Jezebel. She was a king's daughter. Her father was a king, but she was a queen. Go out and take care of her and send it over, and they're going to bury her, I guess, at a plot near Naboth's vineyard, of all things, because that's what was prophesied. When they go out to find Jezebel, what do they come across? Not a whole lot's left, right? Her body's pretty much gone. The soles, the palms of her hands, and a few other body parts, it's all that's left. So the prophecy's fulfilled. The prophecy that God had told Elijah that she would be eaten by dogs. All right, 2 Kings 2, 9, 30 through 37 is where you can find the end of Jezebel. She was eaten by dogs. Number 53, young men who mocked Elisha. What happened to them? They were torn by bears. Elijah and Elijah were together. They'd went across the Jordan. Elijah's translated, taken up in a chariot. We remember that. Elisha asked for a double portion. He's given that, and he comes back across Jordan. And as he's coming back, some other things happen. But one thing that happens there are some, the King James says children, probably more correctly, young men who mock him. Does anybody remember how they mocked him? Yeah. Talked first of all about his bald head. That's not very nice. But they said, go on up. Bald head. Referencing the story that they had been, the account that they had been given of what happened to Elijah. Oh yeah, Elijah went up in a chariot. Really what they're saying is, we don't believe that. We think that you took him out there in the wilderness somewhere, he died, you buried him, but you've started this story that he was taken to heaven and didn't die. Go on up, you old bald head, just like your friend. They were mocking God's prophet, weren't they? And if you're a prophet of God, who are you speaking for? It's in the name, right? God. So if you're mocking or disrespectful to a prophet of God, who are you also being disrespectful to? You're being disrespectful to God. It's probably got less to do with the fact, but it's got some to do with, that they were saying that Elisha was bald. More to do with the fact of they were mocking the accounts or the events that took place with Elijah. We don't believe you. It's all a hoax. So they were being disrespectful to Elisha, and it cost them. 2 she-bears come out. I didn't even give the scripture, did I? 2 Kings 2, 23 and 24. Is that on your sheet? I can't remember if I put that on there or not. 2 Kings 2, 23 and 24. 2 she-bears come out, and it says they tear 42 children, 42 young men, tear them to shreds. They did this because showing a lack of respect for God and His prophet. These young men were mocking the miraculous departing of Elijah, as well as personally making fun of God's prophet. Comments or questions about anything, or particularly this card? The young men who mocked Elisha were torn by 2 bears.
Kids always
Yeah, you can't believe it. Can't believe it. Sin brought leprosy to who? A man called Gehazi. Leprosy. 10 lepers, some other accounts of leprosy, people being sent out of the camp. But the most famous, the most easily recalled leprosy case in the Bible is Naaman, and that's where this is. But we forget, or sometimes we maybe don't even know, but we don't bring this to Gehazi. Gehazi was a servant of Elisha. When Naaman comes and Elisha, or God, through Elisha, tells Naaman to go dip 7 times in the Jordan River, and he doesn't really want to, but they finally talk him into it, and he does it, and he's cleansed of leprosy. That's usually where we kind of end the story, don't we? We don't think a whole lot about Gehazi. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, when Naaman comes and says, hey, look, my leprosy's gone, I want to give you a reward or give you a payment for this. What does Elisha, what would you think, if you don't know, what would you think that Elisha did? Did he accept the payment? No, Elisha would never do that. Elijah wouldn't do that. Peter and John in the New Testament wouldn't do that. They understood that it was God that was doing this, and so for them to take payment for it would be, that'd be overstepping their authority, wouldn't it? It'd be, let's just call it what it is, it'd be wrong. God's doing it. Man should not accept the credit, should not accept a reward for that. So he turns Naaman down, and Naaman leaves. At some point, Gehazi says, I can get me some free stuff. So he chases down Naaman and says, hey, Elisha changed his mind. He had some visitors come and needs some provisions for them. And so Naaman gives him a couple changes of clothes and some silver, I think. Gehazi returns, puts that stuff away. But Elisha knows, doesn't he? Says, where you been? Gehazi, I hadn't been anywhere. So that's a lie, isn't it? So he's greedy and he's lying to cover it up. Finally, it comes out of what's happened. Gehazi took this payment after Elisha clearly had rejected it. And so that's where the leprosy of Naaman was pronounced on Gehazi and his descendants. It says his seed forever. That's a long time, isn't it? It's a long time. All right. Sin brought leprosy to Gehazi and his seed forever. That was what they used to call that, the Reader's Digest condensed version. They even have, I guess Reader's Digest online, probably can get it online, or does it still come in those little small books that we made Christmas trees and snowmen out of? You remember that? About this time of year, everybody brought in Reader's Digest and you folded the pages and you could make a... Regina shook her head, so we're about the same. All right. Last question, last card for the day. Hanged for his sin. A man called Haman. This is in the book of Esther. Esther has been selected to be the new queen of Persia. She has an uncle whose name is Mordecai, who's raised her. And then there's this guy, Haman. Haman thinks a whole lot of himself and feels like that everybody should bow down to him, but Mordecai refuses. Mordecai is a Jew. Mordecai probably says, if I bow down to this man, I'm disrespecting or not doing what I need to be doing to worshiping God. So it makes Haman mad, so mad that he's going to eradicate, get rid of all the Jews, not knowing that the queen is Jewish. My voice almost made it. Not very well, but it almost made it. So Haman basically he's going to wipe out all the Jews because he feels disrespected by Mordecai. We know the story. Esther, through Mordecai's urging, goes to the king to get the law changed. Middle law of the Medes and Persians can't be changed. We know that from Daniel. Once the king signs it, it's good. So she goes and really says, can the Jews protect or fight for themselves? And kind of the king finds out, well, why are you doing this? And she said, well, there's, after some feasts and things, she says, well, this guy Haman is trying to kill all of us. But Haman had built a gallows and he was going to hang Mordecai on it. But when the king found out that he had been duped or tricked into passing this law, what does he do? That's what it says here. Hang for his sin. Haman was hanged for his sin on the same gallows that he had wanted to kill Mordecai. Haman was a liar. He is proud of himself. He is willing to kill an entire race of people just because one man refused to bow to him. All right, that's all throughout the book of Esther. That's kind of the story of, that's the account that's detailed there. All right, I have a new sheet. That'd be number 7. We'll start on that next week. I'll put it in the tray. You can get it for when you're going home. I appreciate your patience and listening to my scruffy voice this morning. Have any comments or questions? If not, we'll take a short break and then we will be back. We'll be back for our worship period.